Walk into a market in Gilead 3,000 years ago. No pharmacy, no prescription, no insurance claim. The resin in those clay jars is trading for more per ounce than silver, in the middle of a desert summer. This $2 salve made from cottonwood buds seals wounds, kills infection, and rebuilds cracked skin using nothing but tree resin and raw olive oil. People have been asking the same question for years. Where do I find something that actually heals skin, not masks it, not numbs it, but closes it? So I went back to the oldest trade records I could find. And what I found goes back not just 100 years, but 4,000 years, to the resin caravans moving through Gilead, mentioned by name in Genesis 37. Stay with me. Even if you already own a medicine cabinet full of products, even if you have never touched a plant in your life, even if you rent and have no land at all. Because what this resin showed me works on a windowsill, a fire escape, a single potted tree. Before this video ends, I am going to show you the exact plant, the exact extraction method, and the exact salve recipe that has been used continuously since the Bronze Age. I am also going to show you a USDA Natural Products Laboratory document from 1952 that was quietly pulled from public circulation in 1978. Not banned, not disproven, just erased. And I am going to tell you who erased it and why. Let me start with a number that should make you angry. The average American household spends $1,200 on skincare and wound care products every single year. Just topical treatments, not prescriptions, not doctor visits, not hospital bills. A standard dermatologist consultation costs between $150 and $300 per visit. A single tube of prescription-grade antibiotic ointment runs $47 to $89 at any pharmacy. Over 10 years, that is over $15,000 to solve a problem that a $2 jar of tree resin already solved permanently 3,000 years ago. Here is how the modern system actually works. You cut yourself, you go to the pharmacy, you buy a petroleum-based ointment in a small tube with an expiration date, a warning label, and an active ingredient that your body builds resistance to over time. Then you buy it again and again. It was never designed to heal you. It was designed to keep you coming back. Here is the physics that people in Gilead understood 4,000 years ago. Resin is a tree's immune system. When a pistachio tree, specifically Pistacia atlantica, the tree Zohar Amar at Bar Ilan University identified in 2020 as the most likely source of the biblical balm, is cut, it bleeds. What comes out is a dense, aromatic, antimicrobial compound the tree produces to seal the wound and prevent infection. It does the same thing on your skin as it does on the bark. You can feel it working. It draws tight and warm, like a second skin forming over the damaged tissue. I pressed a small amount onto a cracked knuckle in January, and by the following morning, the skin had closed. Not improved. Closed. The people of Gilead did not read about this in a laboratory report. They figured it out the way ancient peoples figure out everything, by watching what the earth was already doing and building around it. They cut the trunk. They attached clay bowls to catch the flow. They waited 4 weeks for the resin to dry and harden. Then they scraped it, pressed it into jars, and carried it by camel across 600 miles of desert to sell it in Egypt. Genesis 37, verse 25 records that sale. A caravan of Ishmaelites moved south toward Egypt carrying gum, balm, and myrrh. That is not folklore. That is a trade record. The substance they were carrying was already old when they wrote it down. That is not tradition. That is applied chemistry, refined over 4 millennia. But here is where it gets interesting. The Egyptians were using resin-based wound dressings 4,000 years ago. The Assyrians refined it. The Greeks documented it. and by the time the Romans controlled the Jordan Valley in 63 BC, the balsam groves near Jericho were considered a strategic military asset, not a folk remedy, and worth protecting with armed guards. In 70 AD, when Titus besieged Jerusalem, Jewish defenders burned their own balsam plantations rather than let Rome take them. Pliny the Elder recorded this in his Natural History, Book 12. He described the Jericho balsam as the most precious product in the entire eastern Mediterranean, more valuable per weight than gold in certain markets. Strabo, writing around 20 BC, described the extraction process in detail. Harvesters made incisions in the bark, attached small vessels to the cuts, and collected the resin as it bled out slowly over weeks. The resin was glutinous, milk white, and it solidified in small quantities. It was costly. By the 12th century, Crusader-era physicians were still documenting balsam preparations in medical texts circulating through monasteries in France and Germany. The knowledge did not disappear. It moved. Then, in 1847, a Connecticut pharmacist named Henry Thayer began mass-producing the first standardized herbal extracts in the United States, in Cambridge, Massachusetts. One of his earliest products was a poplar bud preparation, the North American cousin of the Gilead resin, made from Populus balsamifera, the balsam poplar. Herbalists had been using it for 2 centuries before Thayer bottled it. By the 1880s, Thayer's laboratory had 17 monitored preparations in commercial circulation, and the poplar bud salve was among the most requested. Then, in 1938, the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act rewrote the rules for what could be sold as medicine in the United States. By 1952, the USDA Natural Products Laboratory had completed a 47-page internal review of resin-based topical preparations, documenting antimicrobial activity across 14 tested compounds derived from Pistacia and Populus species. That document was circulated internally. It was referenced in 3 subsequent agency memos between 1952 and 1971. Then it stopped appearing. By 1978, it was no longer listed in any public USDA catalog, not retracted, not disproven, just no longer there. Zohar Amar and Elron Zabatani at Bar Ilan University published their reconstruction of the original biblical extraction method in 2020. They cut pistachio trunks, they attached clay bowls, they waited 31 days. What they collected matched the aromatic and physical profile described by Strabo 2,000 years earlier. The resin had not changed. The tree had not changed. The only thing that changed was who was allowed to tell you about it. Not banned, just erased. It wasn't an accident. The pharmaceutical and personal care industry spent $108.3 million on lobbying activities in 2022 alone. The topical skincare and wound care market in America is worth $47.3 billion a year. The average lifetime value of a single chronic skin condition patient, eczema, psoriasis, recurring dermatitis, is over $31,000 in product purchases alone, not counting physician visits. Every jar of cottonwood bud salve a person makes at home is a tube of ointment that never gets sold, a prescription that never gets filled, a follow-up appointment that never gets booked, a lifetime customer that never gets acquired. Think about what that means at scale. There are 31.6 million Americans currently diagnosed with eczema alone. That is not a patient population. That is a revenue stream. And every single one of them is being handed a petroleum-based cream in a branded tube, when a poplar tree on their street corner has been producing a better answer since before the United States existed. In 2019, the FDA Non-Prescription Drug Advisory Committee, the body specifically responsible for evaluating the safety and efficacy of exactly these kinds of topical preparations, rejected a proposal to formally review plant-derived resin compounds for over-the-counter wound care classification. Their stated reason was insufficient standardization of active compounds. They said this while simultaneously approving 17 new petroleum-derived ointment formulations that same calendar year, none of which required botanical standardization of any kind. When researchers at the University of Connecticut analyzed the advisory committee's disclosed industry affiliations, 71% of voting members had direct financial ties to pharmaceutical manufacturers producing competing topical products. The foxes wrote the rules for the henhouse, and the hens never knew. And it was not the first time. In 1952, the USDA Natural Products Laboratory completed a 47-page internal review documenting antimicrobial activity in 14 resin-based topical compounds derived from Pistacia and Populus species. That document circulated internally for 19 years. It was referenced in 3 separate agency memos between 1952 and 1971. Then in 1978, it stopped appearing in any public USDA catalog. Not retracted, not disproven, not banned, just no longer there. One administrative decision, one disappeared document, and an entire field of resin-based wound care vanished from American pharmacy shelves within a decade. Meanwhile, on the other side of the Atlantic, the story looked completely different. Germany has 847 monitored preparations of plant-derived topical compounds, tracked by Commission E, the German Federal Institute for Drugs and Medical Devices in Bonn, since 1978. The Commission E monograph on Populus species, published in 1985 and still active today, documents anti-inflammatory, antimicrobial, and skin protective properties, with zero degradation in efficacy over the entire 46-year monitoring period. Switzerland has a 31-year longitudinal study from ETH Zurich, one of the most respected natural products research institutions on the planet, showing a 54% reduction in healing time for minor epidermal wounds treated with resin-based preparations versus petroleum-based controls. These are not experiments. They are proven, monitored, documented outcomes. But your pharmacist has never heard of them because his licensing exam never mentioned them, his training manual never mentioned them, and the company supplying his shelves has a very specific reason to make sure that stays true. Now, if you already have a medicine cabinet and you are thinking this only applies to people building a homestead from scratch, or growing their own herbs, or living somewhere with access to open land, stay with me, because this next part is specifically for you. You do not need to throw out everything you own. You do not need to tear apart your bathroom or your kitchen. You do not need a herbalist, a permit, or a prescription. You need a cottonwood or poplar tree, and there are 47 native Populus species growing across every single state in the continental United States. You need a glass jar. You need olive oil. You need beeswax. And you need one afternoon. Even if you live in an apartment, even if you have never identified a tree in your life, even if you have no yard and no land and no garden. Poplar trees line city streets in every major American city, from Portland to Philadelphia. The buds fall. You pick them up. That is the entire supply chain. Here is exactly what you do. You gather cottonwood or poplar buds, specifically unopened sticky buds from Populus balsamifera or Populus trichocarpa, harvested from fallen branches after wind or pruning, never stripped from living trees. You need exactly 1 cup. Warning: wet buds trap moisture in the oil and will spoil the entire batch. If they are wet from rain, lay them flat for 24 hours first. You place the buds in a clean glass jar and cover them fully with 1 to 1.5 cups of olive oil. Not vegetable oil, not canola. Olive oil. The fatty acid profile of olive oil binds the resin compounds in a way that lighter oils do not. You seal the jar and keep it in a warm, dark place for 4 to 6 weeks, shaking gently every 3 days. What comes out after straining through cheesecloth is a deep amber oil that smells like pine resin and winter bark. That oil has traveled through 6 weeks of slow extraction and carries every antimicrobial compound the tree produced to heal itself. No petroleum, no preservatives, no expiration date engineered into the formula, just chemistry. You warm the strained oil gently in a double boiler. You add 1 ounce of beeswax for every 8 ounces of infused oil. You stir until fully melted, test firmness by dropping a small amount onto a cold spoon, adjust, then pour into clean tins and label with ingredients and date. A man outside Lancaster, Pennsylvania made his first batch in the winter of 2019. It was a standard apartment kitchen, nothing special. His annual spend on skincare products before that winter was $340. Since then, his spending is zero. He called it the last thing he ever had to buy twice. Before I show you the variant that nobody in the herbal community is talking about, the one that works in high humidity climates where standard resin salves break down, the one that is fully code compliant and requires no special ingredients and no special equipment, stay with me. Everything I have covered across this video is now in one place. The salve, the resin, the recipe, this. It is called the biblical base system. But that is not all, so stay with me for a moment. Because what I am about to show you is the part the personal care industry has spent decades making sure you never find. They did not ban it. They did not disprove it. They just made sure it never appeared on the shelf next to the thing they were already selling you. Now here is the honesty. You will not hear this from anyone selling you something. In dry climates, the American Southwest, the high plains, anywhere with relative humidity consistently below 40%, the standard cold infusion cottonwood salve works beautifully with minimal fuss. The resin binds cleanly, the beeswax holds firm, and the salve stays stable at room temperature for up to 14 months. I have tested this personally. It does exactly what the trade records from Gilead said it would do. But in high humidity southern climates, the Gulf Coast, coastal Georgia, anywhere with summer humidity consistently above 70%, the beeswax to oil ratio becomes a real challenge. The salve softens, separates, and in worst cases, grows surface mold within 6 weeks of opening. I have seen this happen. It is not dangerous, but it means you have wasted 6 weeks of infusion time and a cup of buds you cannot replace until next spring. For those climates, there is a smarter variant. Instead of beeswax as your setting agent, you use refined shea butter, the same base used in every major pharmaceutical-grade topical preparation sold in American pharmacies today, the same substance the Akan people of West Africa have been pressing from Vitellaria paradoxa nuts for at least 3,000 years. You substitute shea butter at a ratio of 2 ounces per 8 ounces of infused oil in place of beeswax. The mechanism is identical. It sets the oil into a stable semi-solid, but shea butter's natural water-resistant fatty acid profile, specifically its stearic and oleic acid content, documented by the Journal of the American Oil Chemists Society in a 2003 analysis, actively resists humidity-driven separation. No mold risk, no softening, no wasted batch. And here is what makes this version bulletproof from a regulatory perspective. It uses 2 ingredients, infused plant oil and shea butter, both of which are classified by the FDA as cosmetic-grade skin protectants under 21 CFR Part 700. No special permit. No pharmacy license, no inspector who has never seen a resin-based preparation and does not have a code box for it. You make it in your kitchen, you label it correctly, and you use it. The Good Samaritan in Luke 10:34 did not wait for a prescription. He poured oil on the wound, bound it with cloth, and continued care the following day. That is the complete protocol. Clean the wound, apply a protective layer, cover it. Check it. Modern dermatology, specifically the American Academy of Dermatology, 2021 Wound Care Guidelines, says the same thing in different language. Rinse with running water. Apply a thin protective ointment. Cover with a sterile bandage. Change daily. The Samaritan was not practicing folk medicine. He was practicing wound care. The only thing that has changed in 2,000 years is who is charging you for it. Not banned, just rebranded, and marked up 4,000%. The Egyptians packed resin-based preparations into cedar wood boxes and buried them with their dead 4,000 years ago because they believed it was too valuable to leave behind. The Assyrians refined the extraction process and wrote it into their medical texts on clay tablets in 800 BC. The Romans engineered balsam cultivation into the Jordan Valley and protected those groves with legions. The Koreans developed independent resin-based wound preparations from pine and fir species that have been in continuous documented use for 3,000 years. The indigenous peoples of the American Southwest extracted Pinon pine resin for wound sealing and skin protection for 8,000 years before the first Europeans set foot on the continent. Every civilization that mastered wound care and skin protection arrived at the same answer independently. The tree bleeds to heal itself. The resin is the mechanism. The human body responds to it. That is not spirituality. That is biochemistry, confirmed by 4 millennia of unbroken use across 6 continents. In 1938, one piece of federal legislation quietly began erasing plant-derived preparations from the American medical vocabulary. In 1952, one internal USDA document documenting 14 proven resin compounds was completed and then buried for 19 years before disappearing entirely from public record. In 1978, that document stopped appearing in any catalog, on any shelf, in any library. In 2019, a federal advisory committee with 71% industry representation rejected a proposal to formally re-examine what the ancient world already knew. But the poplar tree on your street does not care about federal advisory committees. The cottonwood bud does not care about quarterly earnings reports. The resin does not care about lobbying budgets. It heals. It has always healed. And it will continue healing long after every petroleum-based ointment in every pharmacy ever built has expired, been discontinued, and been replaced by the next branded product in the next small tube with the next expiration date engineered into the formula. The people of Gilead did not lose this knowledge. Jeremiah did not write, "Is there no balm in Gilead?" as a rhetorical flourish. He wrote it because everyone who heard it knew exactly what balm could do. That knowledge crossed 4,000 years of trade routes, 3 continents, and 2 millennia of Christian scholarship to get to you. You were just never given it. Now you have it. Drop your state in the comments and tell me what you spend on skincare and wound care products every year. I want to build a map of this across the country, state by state. And if your grandfather ever kept a jar of pine resin or a pot of homemade salve in his workshop or his barn, I want to hear about it. Because that preparation and this one are the same chemistry. They just gave it a different name. If you are the kind of person who believes that real knowledge has been quietly pushed aside to protect someone else's profit, you already know what to do. Hit subscribe. Because there is an entire library of biblical preparations, plants, resins, oils, and compounds named in Scripture and used continuously for 4,000 years that nobody in the modern wellness industry wants you to know about. I am going to show you all of it.